Hey, it's Eric at PDRC, and I finally got to play around with the new Infraction Mega. So here's my first look at the car and my first impressions. One of the first things that I noticed on the car when I opened up the box was there was an electronic smell. Not the, hey, it's a brand new electronics item, it was, hey, something's been smoked. The motor on it, I've noticed, has had a really weird odor coming from it since I opened the box, and then especially after throwing the first battery pack to it. Hasn't slowed it down any, and it hasn't had any issues, and it's passed the hold your hand on it for 5 seconds test after running it hard. Just one of those things that I noted. I'm going to keep an eye on it and see if maybe it's just one of those things that sometimes it's break-in period. It's not like I've never had a car that didn't have a weird odor before that went away over time. But just one of those things that I wanted to note that came right out of the box. It was the first thing that struck me. So one of the things that I noted on the car was it runs straight right out of the box. Usually whenever I open up a car and throw a battery in it, I've got to go tweak and tune and try to get it to line up, and it always seems to be one of those things where there's a little bit of drift. On this one, I was prepared for drift and I didn't get it. It was really nice. On our first event where we were having an on-road race, I had the track set outside the shop, and I was putting my Fortec 3.0 in the hands of a lot of novice drivers and young kids. So they were out there and they were running it, and the car has a lot of scratches on the body now, and this was a brand new body. A lot of scratches because it was constantly being flipped and trued. The reason being is that it was going into the turns so fast that the car couldn't keep up, the body would roll, car would flip over. The Infraction hasn't suffered from that, and that was me sitting there just basically driving at full speed on the pavement, cutting the wheel super sharp, trying to flip it over. I also handed this over to a few inexperienced drivers yesterday, and same result, they were unable to flip it over. I even asked somebody, could you please try to flip it over, just to kind of see what would happen, and they weren't successful. And it was a lot of back and forth for a full lipo pack. She never went over. So on the turns, I think that Infraction is way more stable. I believe that the reason why we've got that level of stability is actually answered underneath the hood. So when you're looking at the car, you're going to see, and there's a lot of sand and dirt in here, you're going to start seeing that there's actually some stabilizer bars in there, and it runs nice and stiff on the suspension when you're kind of going through. It's actually on the front and the rear. So when it's banking on the turns, the pan likes to stay nice and level with the ground. And you can tell from the lack of scratching that's on the bottom of it. And I'm telling you, this car got a lot of miles put on it yesterday, and there's no scratching down here. Usually a telltale sign that the car is bottoming out or hitting rocks, etc. But I really wasn't having any kind of body roll with it. Now, granted, it's at 30 miles an hour, but still, it did phenomenally well on the pavement. That being said, off-road, not so much. As you can tell from all of the debris that's coming out of the inside of it, I live in an area with a lot of pine trees. So when I was running this thing out on the street, it turned into a giant pine straw collector. It was gumming up the tires. There was one point where I had so many pine needles in it, the car didn't even want to move. It was kind of funny. Now, that's going to be same as true with, I've done it with my Senton short course truck, and I've also done it with, one of my Slashes. So it's not picking on the car for, collecting pine needles. I just found it amusing. I'm driving the vehicle and I'm pushing a mound of pine needles. I was actually tempted to see how much power it had, and could I clean up the pine needles on my street, because I needed a rake anyway. But for that portion of the off-road, not so much. I did bottom it out quite a bit when I was running it through fields. When it was cut grass, just like they recommend, if it's low cut grass, this thing was moving for days, and it was kind of fun to hear it bounce. Now, when I was bouncing it, there was some body scrub right here. So when the body's down here, on a normal infraction, you're used to having that splitter at the bottom. There's no splitter here, so you're actually going to hear that body when it hits the ground. I was hearing it a fair amount yesterday when we were kind of going through the field. I had a couple of customers that were looking at it through a field. So on the off-road side of it, wasn't nearly as much, but then again, how many people run their infraction off-road, especially if you're running stock wounds? So it's just that the tires are able to grip off-road. It is good when you're going through, like we got a soccer field down the road, it does remarkably well down there. You know, when I was going through the yard, it was okay. But just kind of bear in mind that, you know, anything that's a little too tall, it's not going to be so much. So if you're looking at one of these for that kind of environment, not the car for you. So out of the box, the infraction is running at about 25 miles an hour. To get that 30 miles an hour that it lists on the box, you need to run it with a 2S LiPo battery. Now, I've been running mine on 2S. So also out of the box, it's comparable to the Fortec 2.0 and the 3.0 brushed versions. So for those two, pretty comparable. However, if you're looking for outright speed out of the box on a brushed car, the Kyosho Phaser is a much faster car. I don't know what the speed is that it goes out of the box, but I have footage showing that it is way faster than the infraction, as you can see here.
Keep going. Alright, so let's see what you did to it. First hit, and...
So out of the box, the Phaser is a faster car. However, we were testing it yesterday to see how well would it do drag racing. I think that the Phaser is not as good for drag race because it's got so much spin on the tires that it's just not hooking, whereas the infraction takes right off. Also, the infraction is way more stable. It pulls a straight line right out of the box right away, whereas the Phaser kind of shoots off to the side, as you can see here.
3, 2, 1, go!
In terms of mods to the car, I've already had a lot of folks asking me what I intend to do with it. I actually intend to keep it bone stock. I like the idea that it's a 30-mile-an-hour car and it's perfect for my needs, which is going to be for on-road track racing here at the shop. However, that doesn't mean that as a speedster, this car isn't designed with speed in mind. When you're actually looking at the car, the wing that's on the back here has already got the lines on it, just like you could see on your normal infraction. That's for trimming it down and working on your profile. Because, of course, you know, if it's sitting here like this, you're going to get a lot of lift in the back, and, you know, you can set it up to any way you like for different speeds. Is that necessary on a 30-mile-an-hour car? Absolutely not. It wouldn't make any difference, in my opinion, whatsoever. It's not going fast enough. So why would you have that there unless you're supposed to go fast with it, right? Also, the platform is set up for modification and upgrades. One of the things that I noted on this car was, and it's something that I also pointed out on the Vortex, is on the shock tower trees themselves, you have these points here and here. You got the holes on the side. And what do we know that those go to? Well, those go to 4S cars. That's right. So when you're looking at like the Outcast 4S or the Creighton 4S, one of the first things that you noted was the tower had a brace going across. So when you drive like a lunatic, you know, kind of like I do, that bracing will really go in and save your butt. But you don't really need that in a Mega line, right? So why would it be in there unless there's intentions of later on in the future adding in some hop-up parts or catering to the speedsters. So I think that this car is remarkably well set up for 4S, but it's an entry point as a Mega line. And honestly, why would you have a roller infraction if you think about it? If you're going to buy a car, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to junk out what's in it and you're going to put in your own stuff. So it's a really great platform if you're looking to set in a 4S system. Or, you know, throw in like a Formula 120, and then of course up to you on what kind of KV motor you want to put in there. But so there's a lot of work that you can do with this car if you want to set it up for a speedster, and everything on this feels like they designed it with that in mind. So one of those things that I would kind of point out is that while this car is not modded out at all, it looks like it would set it up really, really well. Also, when I was looking at the car, I was checking out the tires, and the K-tires are nice, but these new Vendetta tires, this looks like it's going to be really, really great for a lot of on-road. K-tires have those knobs on it, which admittedly I'll probably be grinding off from a lot of the, aggressive cornering on asphalt, whereas these tires are set up more for street. They got a good street tread. They're really grippy right out of the box. So the Vendetta's not out yet, but the tires are. So if you're looking for the tires, it's going to be ARA 550093. So if you're looking for these tires, they should already be available. We keep them on stock at the shop now, so if you're in Florence and you want to come by, remember we don't ship or do online sales, but if you're in the Florence, South Carolina area, swing them by the shop, we'll have the tires. Last but not least is the other stuff that I was noting in here was with the Arma gun. That's the tool that comes with the car. This one came with an Arma gun as well, and the shock tool on it has two different settings. So I kind of wonder what other shock options are going to be available in the future. Only time can tell, but just a quick observation while I had the thing in here. So if you noted the lack of concern for the odor of the motor coming out of the box, it's not just because I have access to an entire hobby shop. That's partly true. It's also because I know that the electronics on this have a 2-year limited warranty, and if I send a copy of the receipt to support and talk to them there, they'll make me whole again and send me another motor. And it's actually a fairly quick process. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Horizon certified dealer. It's because even before I had the shop, that was my experience with them here in the United States, where I just reached out to them and they made me whole, and it was actually a pretty quick process. So not too worried about the smell of the motor at this time. And the motor, it's man-made, nothing is infallible, so it could have just been a bad motor out of the box, or it could just be that there's something in it making an odor. Time will tell when I burn it out, and I will burn it out because I don't use, I abuse. So hopefully this motor will last me a good long while, but if not, I'll take advantage of that 2-year warranty. My final thoughts on the Infraction Mega is I really like it. I think that this Infraction walks in the footsteps of its bigger brother, not in its shadow. I think that it was really well put together. I think that it handles the turning phenomenally, unlike any car I've run so far. I really like its speed, and I really enjoy the fact that you're not being pigeonholed into a single car. What I mean by that is when you go out and you buy a car, it's really not intended to be anything more than what it is and sitting in front of you. And so if you go out and you get a 30-mile-an-hour car, it's typically like a department store special or just an entry-level car, and then that's it. There's no real future for it. But this one, as I pointed out, has designs in it for the future. So when you're buying the car, you don't have to worry about it being 30 miles an hour forever if you don't want it to be. You can change the motor, you can change the ESC, you can upgrade the car, but within reason. There's only going to be an end of that rainbow. You're only going to be able to go so fast and hit mechanical limits on this platform. But the mechanical limits of this platform, I mean, if we're looking at cars like the Vendetta that's coming out soon, that car goes 70 miles an hour. It's this size, so you know that you can at least do 70, and true to Arma form, generally whenever they design a car, it can go faster than what it says on the box if you want to take the time and energy to do it. So who knows what this thing will be able to do. But you're not going to sit there and get stuck with something at 30 miles an hour, and I think that's pretty cool. At the end of the day, I like the car. The off-roading stuff, not so much on it, but you're not going to get an infraction for off-roading generally. But I like the fact that you can run this in your yard, you can run this in the grass, you can take it out, you can take it on a dirt road and just have fun with it. You're not going to go through a cornfield with it, obviously. It's going to frame out every single time. But I'm not too much worried about high centering it in my front yard, which this is well suited for. So unless you got a lot of pine trees in your yard like I do, this car actually does pretty good in your grass and in your front yard, better suited to pavement though. So at the end of the day, I like the Infraction, I like what it can do, I like the future that it has, and I think it's a really good addition to the ARMA lineup. Really looking forward to seeing what I can do with it, what my customers are going to bring in the shop and show me what they've done with it, and share their stories. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, hit the like button. If you want to leave me a comment in the comment section, that would be great. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye now.